Yeah, so I'm not going to talk about the manifesto. But yes, so this talk is, I have a pre-talk that is the talk before the talk. This talk's not very long, so I have some possible discussion points we can talk about afterward, if you all want to talk about that. But the talk about the talk is actually, I first gave a version of this talk in January 2013. My dad had gotten sick, or at least I found out he was sick about a month before, and so I was on, mortality is scary, so I did what anyone logically does, and I wrote a talk about finding meaning at Fred, which is kind of like TED, but for your friends. So I was trying to figure out how I find meaning when I was dealing with some serious issues in my life. And this is that talk, with some updates, because things have changed a lot for me in a year and a half. So it was more, so that pre-talk is because when I wrote it, it was more for me than it is for you. Most of my talks are nowadays do veer more of a technical direction rather than a non-technical direction. This is not technical. This is about me and how I value things, and it's personal. So maybe you'll find something in there, but that's the meta talk to let you know that it's more for me than it is for you. So, on with it. So craftsmanship, finding grounding in the digital world. So I'm Pam, and I make things with computers, and that's what I say when I talk about myself. Because I think that that's one of the ways that how we conceptualize ourselves and our identity is, when someone asks what you do, and they mean what you do every day for money, I say I make things with computers. I say I make things. I also do a lot of other things too now. So that's something that's definitely, the number of bullets on this is a lot since 2013. So I write, speak, organize, teach, podcast. I also do other things like ride bicycles and do vegan activism. So I have a very rich and fulfilling life. But to the matter at hand, so how do we think of craftsmanship? So when I think of the word craftsmanship, the first things that I think of are something like maybe this. This looks like a well-crafted chair. Or something like this. I actually, back in the day, I used to do some fashion. And so I think of just making things with my hands, crafting things. Things like this. So that's something that actually my dad made, and that's my dad. My dad's a goldsmith. And so my dad, what he does every day, and this is actually not necklace, and he made my rings and most all jewelry I wear. That's what you do if your dad's a goldsmith. So my dad is, he's always been kind of a tinkerer. He taught me to draw. We got out the big drafting table. And my dad always taught me to be curious and to be really interested in making things and always creating. He's just as he's gotten even better as he's gotten older, because he turned into now that he's better, he got better. I can talk about this, and he's just such a weird dude. He just he makes he actually made a cast of his face so that he could make weird monster masks. He's a great guy. But that's me. And there's my ladies, and this is at my first code retreat with a bunch of people. I don't keep in contact anymore. I still remember Sebastian Hermida, Brian Guzman, John Conley. But that was actually my first code retreat, which kind of introduced me to the idea of software as craft. And so this is about what craftsmanship is to me, and why by finding identity and kind of craftsmanship, I find value in it. So craftsmanship to me breaks down in kind of 3 parts. This is my thing, as I said. I'm not going to talk about the manifesto, because the manifesto probably says something completely different. So to me, I break it down to artistry, collaboration, and finding meaning. So being an artist is something that, being a creator, being a maker. So like my dad makes stuff like this, but where I end up drawing stuff a little bit more like this. However, I do get to draw as part of my day job. So on the plus side, even though my architecture diagrams aren't as beautiful as someone's paintings, I do get to draw and conceptualize things in my head for money, which is pretty fantastic. So thinking about design, thinking about the fact that we don't just, follow things to, you can make a chair by, like following the IKEA instructions, or you can make a chair as someone who deeply understands it and designs an interesting chair. And so we can all learn to craft, to make, and be proud of it. And on collaboration, so that's also apprenticeship is something that's important to me in teaching. So I do a lot of teaching. That's something that's definitely increased since 2013. So working with people and making things. So Code Retreat, which now since going to that very first one, now Dragon and I organized the Philly Code Retreat. So it's a day of intensive practice focused on core values and collaborativeness, core value of it. So that's a picture of a code retreat where you're doing pair programming. So you, probably most people at this meetup, when I gave this talk at Fred, I was not for software developers. And so I explained what pair programming is. But pair programming is like two people working on a problem together, and you're solving it together. And so you learn by having that collaborative environment. And apprenticeship being kind of a more, in a formal sense, you have a relationship between a master and apprentice, but saying that as someone with more skills, I want to share that knowledge with others and help them reach a new level for themselves, because we find happiness and meaning in this world by helping other people, by not just doing things for ourselves. And so that was an old-timey apprenticeship photo. And this is, I used to do more of this teaching at PyStar. I do teach a lot with girl development nowadays. But running big events like this at PyStar and teaching people to code have just been fantastic. So create collaboratively and share your knowledge. That's the takeaway from that. I told you this was a quick talk. The last one is finding meaning. So this one is the section that most changed since 2013, because what it actually was is a couple of the projects that I've done lately. And back then, I had recently finished a big civic hacking project. I worked for a company that everyone loved. Now I work for a company that everyone hates. So where I find meaning has changed a little bit. Because a lot of the things are outside of my day job, and so the crafting I do in my day job is more kind of the architecture and not really things I can take pictures of, and working with people, the collaboration. So, but a recent project I did, and this was last summer when I was working at Access Philly, and this did recently, there was an article in Atlantic about it, but it lets you explore the inventory of the public school system, so you can see what books a public school has, or at least what they say they have. And also during this year, Skill Crush launched their JavaScript curriculum, which I wrote most of. So I think that's fantastic. And when I remember that I wrote that, and people are now using it to change their careers and change their lives, it's pretty fantastic. And I also wrote a book. So it's a tiny picture of the book that is out in early release, and it will be out in September, and it kind of blows my mind that I did that. And this last Saturday also blows my mind. I still have not internalized this, that we ran a JavaScript conference with over 100 people on Saturday. And so I still have not internalized this. I do have a good t-shirt, so I'll still remember, I won't forget. So I did something, and it was for other people, and they learned something. So because when you're making things, like nothing beats the I made that. And I think part of when I call this finding grounding in the digital world, that it's about, I always worried, like when I was going to, grow up and become a business person, that I would be one of those people who can't tell someone what they do. Like when you ask someone what they do, they're like, I'm an analyst. And you're like, I'm so sorry. But the fact that you're someone who makes things sets you apart from people who can't point to what they do. And so identifying as a craftsman. So that crafting can look like this. You can be a maker of physical things. And actually now we have a lot of cool overlap between technology and physical world. You can make things, you can create things with your words, create projects, create events for people. You can also create things digitally, creating software for people. So creating things people touch or experience is what makes you a craftsman. So that's us. Creators, not builders. I like that phrase. And so I had 2 links that I was going to say if you wanted to check them out. I really like this care and feeding of software engineers, or why engineers are grumpy. And that is what that phrase is from, creators, not builders. That treating people who write software like people who follow IKEA instructions isn't a very nice thing to do. And if you treat them like they're creators and that they're actually making something and crafting something, then you'll have a happier life. And then my friend Rachel Neighbors did a short keynote at OzCon on storytelling. And I think that like storytelling, creating stories, and crafting are kind of part of a good ecosystem together. So that is really it. And I have some discussion questions for you guys if you want. Or you can ask me questions first if you want. Yeah.
How do you, I want to say champion, but how do you try to engage other people in craftsmanship?
So how do I try and champion, or how do I try and engage other people in craftsmanship?
Yeah, so that you can infect other people with
Yeah.
the idea of, you know.
Definitely. That's a great question. Probably like my favorite point on that was actually, he was in the picture from my first code retreat, was Sebastian Hermina, did this great talk. It was like at my first bar camp where he talked about keep zombies in my workplace. And he had techniques for if you work with people who aren't passionate, and you know they've been so downtrodden, they've been like reorged and all this stuff like so many times that they've lost all love of what they do. And so he had a lot of suggestions for that. But it is definitely really hard to inspire people to. Usually, what I do nowadays is I try and learn a whole lot more about them as people, and usually that's been my route. Like up into like asking about their kids and like finding out just like trying to see them so I see them as a whole person, and then I can find out what they really want to do, like what they really want to spend their time on, so that I don't give them like project work that's not what they want to spend their time on. Because when you give someone like that piece that they really want to work on, they just like go to town on it. Whereas if you give them something they're kind of begrudgingly doing just because they kind of have to do it, then that's exactly what they're going to do. So I had one of my discussion questions that I liked was, so these are the 3, is what have you made lately, what do you value, and then I wanted to ask, what do you tell people when they ask what you do? So, Javon, what do you tell people when they ask what you do?
I guess I just write software, and I give examples of some stuff that I've built.
Yeah, so you give examples of things you built. Yeah. Yep. Q, you got the name tag.
I do. I always have my name tag. I tell people I'm a software engineer who loves to solve problems
Nice.
and come up with innovative solutions.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it sounds like, most people who would come to a software craftsmanship meetup aren't going to be, because you'll hear some people say like, I program things.
That can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
can do that for television.
Yeah, true.
Are these, you're going to make these slides available?
Sure, I can.
That would be nice.
Yeah, all right, I will, and then I'll post one meetup. Yes.
Whenever I've been talking about craftsmanship, I was wishing there were a more gender-neutral word. Have you...
Craftspeopleship?
Yeah.
Craftspeople.
Kind of awkward. Have you... I don't know. How do you have any way of working with that, or do you just accept craftsman as...
I probably just accept craftsman, just because craftsman, kind of like,
like journeyman is also like a family term to that word.
Okay.
And so like we kind of get them all together. Maybe it's just a function of like women not being able to work in the last
Another one like that is
6
fellowship.
years.
Fellowship.
Fellowship.
There's really no substitute.
Ah.
And it's all male.
Oh yes, because you're a fellow.
Yeah. Not that it's like craftsmanship or journeyman.
No, but yeah.
Long-time listener, first-time commenter. I wonder about that myself, and the way I'm interested to see is it's not gonna like change it in craft personship. It becomes it's like the universal declaration of human rights. It's like they took out brotherhood. We should treat each other with brotherhood and brotherhood and sisterhood because it's very complex. It just kind of carries on. But I think some way we look at it is like there's human and there's craftsman. We're a subset of humans, and some people in the craftsman subset of human are also women. And well, also like the man thing, like you can think of it as like humanity. I'm a human. The narrow majority of doctors would confirm that. So nothing but us humans.
I think also people sometimes use the term maker. So that's really one, but maker also can mean something very different. So that it's not necessarily tied into not as much of a culture. So like the craftsmanship has like mentoring, apprenticeship, that you're on kind of a journey and that you're mastering something. Whereas, almost in a good way, like I like that maker just means like wholesale, I make something. And anyone can make something. Anyone can be an artist. You won't be a very good one, but anyone can be an artist.
Are you familiar with Mike Montero? Okay, so he's like a designer guy, designer person, talks about stuff. And like one of his fields is like design is a job. Like he doesn't like the word.
Oh, he's the one who did design as a job.
Yeah. So I was wondering, like, that's like that's almost like how I feel when people talk about like craftsmanship. I was wondering if you had a take on like.
Interesting. I hadn't drawn those together, but I like it.
Yeah.
Because in general, like, I think part of the thing that it's responding to is like a gap that people perceive and like respect for it. That like people make things, you know, they do it because they like to do it, they love to do it. But it's nice if you respect them for it too. And so when someone looks at your logo or website design, they're like, my 5-year-old can use Photoshop. That's not very respectful.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that you draw that parallel, because I think they are coming from a very similar place.
Experiment, we're going to pass the mic. Somebody back there.
I guess my question kind of draws to the point where I feel like craftsmanship, and I think by default, a lot of people think of that as a solo endeavor. And for me, my recent career thing, like I worked for myself for 8 years, and over the last 9 months, I worked as part of a team. And it's been interesting because the skill set on the team varies dramatically. And there are definitely points on my day where I get frustrated because we end up shipping stuff that is like, I feel like if I had time all to myself, like if I could do it myself, it would look a lot nicer. But I don't know if you have any comments or suggestions for like how to get over that, how to embrace the uniqueness of what we've created. Or I don't know if there's any comments. I guess you mentioned collaboration.
Yeah, that's actually really important to me.
And the challenges that is.
Yeah, it's really important to work with other people, and like that there isn't just a certain level of like getting over it that I had to deal with when, you know, because over the years I've gone from being the person that other people mentored to starting doing more mentoring, and realizing that like sometimes it's more important to give someone a win, you know, that like, you know, this works, is not perfect. You know, it's not like we aren't going to frame it and put it on the code review wall of like best code, you know, that we've ever done. But it's more important for that person to have a win so that they're inspired to keep going and like they, you know, they feel proud of their work, and like that's kind of like the inspiration component, and it's actually realizing that there's a trade-off, that, you know, and that's part of the whole person thing, that recognizing that they're a whole person, respecting them as such. That's how I justify it in my head. So that it's like, I'm gonna stop and realize that this is more important to just like accept that this will not be completely perfect.
I already took mine. I'm really glad you asked that question because I was thinking about the same thing. So I work in an environment where we're always collaborating all the time. Really, it's all collective ownership. Nobody owns anything. So when you put up the question of what have you made lately, you know, you could argue that I haven't made anything lately. We have made. We have made many things. You know, I don't have my name on very many things out there. But I also work in a very collaborative environment where the skill sets vary. And so the thing that popped into my head was like, well, what is it that I make that is mine that, okay, I'm gonna change direction slightly because I'm about to use the word own and people in the same word, in the same phrase. But I think what I make is better developers. It may not be a line of code, you know, yeah, my name, you know, like I'm on a message someplace, but you can't trace it necessarily directly back to me or.
So like, so you feel that that's like the role you play in your team.
Yeah, but I hadn't really, I'm really glad I'm here because I hadn't thought about that until just now.
Yeah.
So I thought the distinction you made between maker and builder was really interesting. Because when people ask me what I do, I say I build software. But maybe now I'm thinking about that, it's not quite the right word. Because I do think, to me, software is a very creative, artistic process. So word choice may change. But I did want to ask you, have you always thought of building software as a very creative, artistic endeavor, or has that kind of grown as you develop more? And two-part question, how did you get into software development?
Because actually the latter is related to the former. Because I got in through the web, I didn't get into software through, I did do some computer science, but I didn't get into software particularly that way. So I didn't get into software from, I'm going to write some Java and then there'll be, a piece of software. I got into it from blogs and, theming and things like that, where it was an inherently creative thing, and designing experiences. So actually that's something I'm starting to say too, is that I build, if I do say I make things, I say I make things on the internet, but now I sometimes say I build experiences for people, and so things for people to interact with, and then I'm doing that on more forums as the broad generalization of what I do.
So I think your question there is interesting. What have you made lately?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the best thing you've made, except
That's true.
the bias might be that as a craftsman you get better and better.
No. I think you can still always make something that's not fantastic. I just learned how to use Travis CI a week and a half ago. But there's plenty of people who don't know how to use it, and my Travis CI setup is not the most elegant Travis CI setup, but it works. And so the computers deploy my website, so that's great. But as long as there's also the learning thing too. As long as I learn something, the quality isn't as big of a factor, as long as I can justify that I learned something.
A quote from Voltaire that you might use for some of these things is, perfect is the enemy of the good.
Oh, a quote
I was saying that first thought of that when this guy was talking about.
Yeah, it's
He
actually
could have done it better himself.
a quote on my Facebook.
I collect quotes.
is not that, but I do like that one. But it is, if we wait for absolutely everything to be ready, then we shall never begin.
Exactly.
So,
I wanted to make a comment about the idea of craftsmanship. which to me it implies quality and something that's done with love and care, which sometimes we have to sacrifice.
Yeah, that's how
In the sense that you were just talking about with the club.
Yeah.
But ultimately, to me, programming is an act of creating beauty.
I like that.
We good?
So, I'll come back to another thing that I've been frustrated with, is that historically, I have built products or services that I have owned, and now I'm building products or services for other people through like a contracting status, and like it is really disheartening to throw like a lot of love into a project, only to have the contract be done at midnight, and like you have no more involvement with it. You have no involvement from the customers or the user base really. Like you just built it for the client, and I don't really. I mean, this is just a problem. I guess. I don't know if there's any more solution to it.
Yeah, I mean, my solution is I don't like doing client work. So I generally always prefer, I have kind of a no agencies role. I don't like doing contracts. Like, it's just because then you have to hand it off. And like, okay, because even if you work on a product for a company, you have to hand it off anyway. That happens. But at least I can like mentor that person and, you know, like do all this stuff rather than, you know, you get a contract, you're given something that's half broken already, and then you like fix it like, you know, like 30% of it that you can get to within the contract time, and then you hand it off again, and then they email you 6 months later, and you open it back up, and you're like, what the hell did you all do? Like, and so that's why I generally avoid it.
It could be like raising a child till they're like 5, and then you gotta keep them up. And then they hand it back to you at like 16. You're like, what did you do to this
What
poor
did you
child?
Imagine though, both with what you said and with what Mike said, that you can draw the parallel to other sorts of craftsmanship. That if you make tables and chairs, and that's what you're good at crafting, you can only have so many tables and chairs in your own house.
Right.
And at some point you have to learn to sell them, give them away, decide when they're finished, not spend forever perfecting them. And then at the same time, sometimes, I don't know, say you craft a musical instrument, and then a family buys it for their kid, and they take it to band class, and they beat it up, and it gets dented, and they can't even play it that well anyway. I imagine that would be something you'd have to learn to deal with as well. So like other craftspeople, we just have to sometimes be like, well, hey, you know, at least I did my part well.
I think that idea of ownership is really interesting, and I haven't thought about it a lot because right now I'm at a job that I don't care a whole lot for, and we don't do a lot of craftsmanship. We just build craft to get out to people, and there isn't that respect. Like, it drives me nuts that my boss actually was like dinging me, wasted a lot of time on testing.
It's like exactly what you should say to stop procrastination.
Yeah. I was like, you really should have told me this when you were about to send me off, or could have saved some time.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting idea I'm thinking about, the idea of ownership, and something I think is really neat about what we do is that I can see where it would be really hard to let go of something, especially like months and months in. But to me, but it almost said but like beginning. So I'm erasing that.
And.
To me, new sentence. To me, a huge part of what makes this an enjoyable thing to do is sharing it with people. And I didn't realize how Pollyanna-ish that would sound until it just happened, but I really do think that. And then there's interesting thing with people when you're on the same page, like they come back with, yeah, now that we've done this, we've done this. And it's like, oh, crap. That is a thing investigate.
I think ownership is a really good point. Because, yeah. It sounds like we're talking about like the balance between, you know, having like the love for what you build and, you know, being able to let it go. Was it hold on tightly, let go lightly?
I was thinking Darth Vader. The tighter you hold, more you slip through your things.
Yeah, I was just gonna piggyback on that. I mean, like Mike's point, when a product's your own, it's not gonna grow without you doing something. And if you're working on a project for like a year or two, it hurts to let go of the reins, but it's cool like 2 or 3 years later to be able to see like who you handed it off to. Actually,
Oh yeah, I do like
stuff
seeing
like
like, yeah, stuff that, you know, stuff that I built other places has been completely redesigned, but like, I can still like find like some of the work that I like deep within there.
a site I built in like 1998 is still on front. And it just amuses me every time I go back.
And it's like on the front page of your portfolio, right? You're like, hi, let's check out this 1998 website.
Localinternet.com.
I figured you were watching time.
Oh, yeah, I was going to go as long as you yeah, do we want to? Oh, got some more comments.
Yeah, you know, hearing everybody talk, I thought it was really interesting that more of the creative aspect of software development hasn't been talked about. And one of the things that I want to bring up is that we're actually all explorers as well. And we get to explore, you know, different languages and different coding techniques and different processes. And that's something that I personally really enjoy in the craftsmanship that I do.
And learning to think differently and like doing different techniques.
Right, you know,
Yeah.
having done, you know, work with multiple languages, to see the way that you know, different aspects of those things work. That's very exploratory. It's very creative, kind of fun, exciting thing that we get to do as craftsmen in software.
I just want to say something on owning your craft. That, you know, when you write something, you have to write something that's lousy. And my code is riddled with fixed needs and to-dos. You know, sometimes you just have to do it just to get it out the door. But I keep a list of that stuff. And as long as I'm on the project, I'll revisit it and go back in and try to fix it. And even if I can, you know, when I have some free time, I'll go back in and look up some stuff and do a little bit of research. And sometimes I'm even successful. And I do end up going back and making something better. If not, then there's be a note there for the next person. Oh, for the love of God, please do something with it.
So you actually do that in the code?
I put in comments.
Right,
It's like,
yeah.
it's an epic story.
Yep.
And I think part of that's a great idea. Like, you know, if you have to make a mistake once, like, you know, if you have to do what you have to do to get the project done, then that, you know, that's fine. But doing it a second time, that's on you. Like, when the next project comes around and you realize you did the same exact thing wrong, or you know, went down the same rabbit hole, then I think that's on you. So you have to, like you said, like, you know, maybe you know, keep a list of, okay, here's the things that went wrong, and you know, when the next project comes along, learn how to do those things right, so you're right that time.
I want to thank Pam again for speaking.
Yeah.